See June 29th, 2022 news articles related to Indian Express. First article is related to pre-packaged food under GST 12% on hotel with tariff up to 5,000. On day 1, there was a general consensus on rate rationalization. Day 2 said to take up more contentious issues of extending compensation to states beyond June. Bringing pre-packaged and labeled food items such as wheat flour, puffed rice, curd, lassi, buttermilk, paneer under GST net, withdrawing exemption for hotels with rent below 1,000 a day, and correction of inverted duties of a host of items such as edible oil, coal, LED lamp, printing ink, knife, solar water heater are known to have been approved by GST Council. The discussion on contentious issues of extension of compensation for states beyond June 2022 and 28% GST rates on casinos, online gaming, horse racing are taken up for deliberation. According to the source, GST Council has also approved compliance measures for high-risk taxpayers, including mandatory biometric authentication, including of electricity bill data, real-time validation of all bank accounts against a particular PAN and geotagging, mandatory generation of e-way bill by states, infrastructure, transportation of gold, precious stones also have been approved by council, but the decisions on threshold has been left to the states. Next article that we are moving into is related to in Ukraine's shadow. This article talks about G7 meet framed a West preparing a prolonged conflict. Global community must find a way to mitigate its fallout. In Germany, as in much of worlds in recent months, Ukraine cast a long shadow at the summit of G7, which was also attended by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and leaders of South Africa and Indonesia. Among others, the message was clear. The US and its allies foresee a prolonged conflict in Ukraine. They will continue to support Vladimir Zelensky and peoples of Ukraine in their fight against militarily superior neighbor. For now, the differences with the G7 with regard to their reliance on Russian commodity export, especially the dependence on Russia's natural gas, have been put aside, and grouping has vowed to align and expand the target sanctions to further restrict Russia access to key industrial inputs, services and technologies. Prime Minister Narendra Modi reiterated New Delhi's position in an unequivocal equivocal terms. There must be an immediate cessation of hostilities in Ukraine, and dialogue and diplomacy are the way forward. The fact is that the conflict has progressed. Its effects have been felt far beyond Europe. The food and fuel inflation continue to be on rise, have hit the poorest people and nations the hardest. If the Zelensky reported that in his address to the leader gathered in Bavaria, the conflict gains new momentum in winter. Global community must find way to offset the economic and humanitarian crisis that will likely ensue. On the economic front, the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment announced by US President Joe Biden holds promise under it, and G7 has committed to invest $600 billion by 2027 in a host country including India in infrastructure that improves the lives and delivers real gains for all of our people. The Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment aims to act both as alternative and foil to China's Belt and Road Initiative, which has lately have been seen has been as imposing an untenable debt burden on developing economies such as Sri Lanka, Pakistan, along with the reasonable request by India for greater investment of the developing worlds in the clean technologies to mitigate climate change. Next article is preparing for 5G. This article talks about internet connectivity is critical for making Digital India project inclusive. Widespread use of optical fiber in the remote corners of the country is vital to ensure that no one is left behind in this endeavor. With over 117 crore telecom users and 82 crore internet subscribers, India is the fastest growing market for digital consumers. A 2019 McKinsey's study rated India as the second fastest digital economy. 5G technology is going to make inroad into country very soon. To stop Top smartphone manufacturers in India have already released phones with 5G capability. Networking equipments that rely on optical fibers and semiconductor-based device ecosystem are at the heart of the building infrastructure that will need the country takes next step in its digital journey. The government has been taken several measures to build the next generation digital infrastructure, but the success of the initiative, such as BharatNet Phase 2, world's largest rural broadband project, which aims to provide broadband connectivity to all 2.5 lakh gram panchayat across the country, hinge on the deployment of high quality fibers. Basic requirement of 5G will be data transmission network. Optical fiber is the backbone of the digital infrastructure required for this purpose. Data is transmitted by light pulses traveling through a long strand of thin fiber. Indian manufacturers have a strong presence across the value chain of this industry. In the last 10 years, domestic manufacturers invested more than 5,000 crore in this industry, which has generated direct and indirect employment for around 4 lakh individuals. India exported optical fiber worth $138 million to over 132 countries between April 2022 to November 2021. India's annual optical fiber manufacturing capacity is around 200 billion fiber kilometer, and the domestic consumption is around 46 million fiber kilometer. Indian optical fiber cable consumption is pre-directed to increase 33 million fiber kilometer by 2026 from 17 million fiber kilometer in 2021. A little more than 30% of the mobile towers have fiber connectivity. There is a need to be scaled up at least 80%. In the anticipation of this demand, domestic manufacturers have been ramping up their capacities over the last few years. However, India's optical fiber industry have also seen unfair competition from the cheap imports from China, Indonesia and South Korea. These countries have been dumping their products in India at rates lower than the market price. The World Trade Organization defines dumping as international price discrimination situation in which the price of the product offered in the importing countries is less than the price of the product that is exporting countries' market. Imposing anti-dumping duty is one of the way of protecting the domestic market. India need to invest R&D, offer production-linked incentive schemes to support indigenous high-tech manufacturers and develop intellectual property in critical aspects of digital connectivity. Digital infrastructure created in the process should serve as a springboard for our growth in the next 20 years. We are at a crossroads now. The need of the hour is to unlock the full potential of India's optical fiber industry and enable India to emerge as a major manufacturing and technology hub while achieving the Atmanirbhar Bharat in its 5G journey. Next article is all about inevitability of Agnipath. This article talks about US was the only country that saw a coming revolution in military. Even Soviet military theorists way back in early 1970s had started applying themselves to military technological revolution. By mid-1990s, even China, fueled by a decade of economic growth, had commenced a fundamental restructuring of both its forces and command structure. The trigger for the reform in China were the twin projection of projects powered by US, namely the Gulf War 1990 and Taiwan Strait Crisis 1995. The Chinese Communist Party leadership recognized that it lacked the technology pros to wage a modern war that could proscribe foreign powers from intervening in the region. They adapt a three-pronged approach to exponentially ramping up defense spending. It involved investing in new weaponry, enhancing anti-access areas, denial tactics, establishing programs to boost the Chinese defense industry. However, one of the fundamental changes they initiated was to develop an integrated fighting force with the first-rate naval and air capabilities, approximately 3 million in mid-1970s, and higher defense management paradigm was recognized into Theatre Command by February 2016. In the wake of Kargil 1999, India was also started a serious thinking of reforming and modernizing its defense forces and command control structures. Kargil Review Committee recommended one pertain to recruitment process of the armed force. It stated army must be young, fit at all. Therefore, instead of present practice of having 17 years of color service, it would be advisable to reduce the color service to a period of 7 to 10 years and thereafter release of these officers and men for service here. In 2000, group of ministers endorsed the Kargil Review Committee's recommendation, stating that in order to ensure that armed forces are in a fighting best all time, there is a need to ensure a younger profile of the services. However, this is a highly complex matter. While the army desires a young age profiles, so do the central paramilitary forces. Thus, the Agniveer recruitment reforms must be contextualized in the backdrop of large canvas of defense reforms that includes the appointment of CDS, reorganization of armed forces into theater command to promote jointness and synergy. The future of warfare entails a lighter human footprint, but soldiers equipped with the state-of-art weaponry supported by cutting-edge technology to fight a war in a highly informized environment. This recruitment reform would help in right-sizing the armed force, provides it gets devitalized into imperatives of fifth-generation warfare. Next article is all about Not Yesterday's Club. This article talks about the war in Ukraine, challenge of post-pandemic economic recovery, the eternal issues of climate change, the war in Ukraine, post-pandemic economic crisis, eternal issues of climate change. In the circumstance, the G7 countries managed to present a united front, which was noteworthy. There was an unconventional commitment that grouping will provide financial and humanitarian, military and diplomatic support and stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Predictably, the statement comes down very hard on Russia and comes close to accusing it of war crimes. Russia was also warned that any use of chemical, biological, nuclear weapons would meet in the severe consequences. Further intensification of sanctions against Russia was contemplated, including tariff on Russian products, targeting gold exports, capping oil prices, restricting access to technology. Was increasingly military assistance by West to Ukraine, evidenced by impending supply of Norwegian advanced surface-to-air missile system used by Americans to protect the White House by the US to Ukraine, could lead to an arms race. NATO, ahead of its summit meeting in Madrid following the G7, has already let it know that its rapid reaction force meant to protect the alliance eastern flank will be increased from its present strength of 40,000 to whooping 3 lakh. Significantly, G7 final communique has a tough language on China as well. It says there is no legal basis of China's expensive maritime claim in the South China Sea. It calls on China to press Russia to withdraw the troops from Ukraine and expresses grave concerns about the country's human rights situation. It calls on Russia to China to respect universal human rights and fundamental freedoms in both Tibet and Xinjiang, highlighting the issue of forced labor in the latter. The fact is that even G7 know its clout has declined compared to say 20 years ago. That explains the move to invite key G20 countries as observers to its summit. As for India, its importance lies in the undeniable truth that no global problem has been seriously tackled without New Delhi's involvement. The question is whether India can use this to make full transition from being a rule taker to becoming rule shaper in at least some crucial areas. India has let its name to new statements issued by G7. One is titled Resilient Democracy Statement, and other is Joining Forces to Accelerate Clean and Just Transition Towards Climate Neutrality. The first statement talks of democracies as a reliable partner seeking to promote rules-based international order and it's supporting democracies worldwide, including through the electoral assistance. Prime Minister Modi said a forceful intervention on how India, without being responsible for the problem of climate change. G7 is trying hard not to be yesterday's club. It's a powerful grouping with 7 of its members in the top 10 economies of the world, 3 of the permanent members of UN Security Council. If you count the European Union, it is still home to some of the best emerging technologies. That's all. If you like the video, please do share, like, comment and subscribe. Let us continue the next article in the next video. Have a nice day.